It seemed like Annika was glued to her phone, and from my perspective, Kim wasn't holding her accountable to our agreement as a couple. And I'll tell you what, I just got ticked off. I was angry, and before we knew it, we were in the biggest fight of our marriage.
Yeah.
Literally, this was the biggest blowout we've ever had in our marriage.
Yeah.
I started throwing everything in the car 3 days before we were scheduled to leave, and bam, our fun family vacation was cut short. Kim and I were deadlocked in battle, and in my mind, the root of the problem was only one thing, and it was Annika. It was actually Annika I was blaming it on. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 46.
Yes.
We are closing in on 50 episodes. That's pretty
It's hard to
exciting.
believe.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Glad
And
you're here.
We just want to keep bringing you value and talk about topics that are relevant and important to you. And so we would love some feedback from you as well to help us know that we're doing that. And you can do that in the form of a rating or a review over on Apple Podcasts. And we would so much appreciate
Yeah,
that.
it'd be great.
Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember when you were dating your current spouse? You were probably thrilled with each other and excited every time you were getting ready for a date. And then eventually you maybe met each other's kids and it went pretty well overall. Maybe it was a little awkward, but for the most part, everyone was on their best behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Now, pretty soon, you couldn't wait for the wedding day, and you looked forward to blending your families. Sure, you knew there was going to be some challenges that were going to pop up along the way. But overall, you also knew that love would prevail and everyone would adjust, right? But now, maybe it feels a little bit different. You've started noticing this wedge between you and your spouse that wasn't there before. And when your stepkids are around, that wedge seems to explode into a chasm, leaving you feeling disconnected and maybe frustrated. It seems like every time the kids are in your home, there's just more stress and there's tension. Your spouse seems to take their side in every argument, and you feel stuck on the outside, like your input just doesn't matter. You've tried to be patient. You've tried pouring on kindness even when you have to fake it. Or maybe you've just tried stuffing your feelings, hoping things would change. Or you've decided that you just need to count down the months or even the years until the youngest stepchild is going to turn 18, and then finally you can enjoy your marriage.
Yeah.
But none of that has seemed to work. That wedge keeps growing and you're feeling resentful. And even though you don't want to admit it, down inside you might be wondering, are my stepkids ruining my marriage? This kind of thought's a tough one to admit. And if this is you, the truth is you're not the only one who struggles with it.
Yeah, so true. You know, one stepmom that we worked with was just feeling hopeless around all of this. I remember her words. She said it felt torturous.
Yeah.
Torturous. As the stepmom, I was starting to doubt there would ever be a solution that could make it bearable. You see, her anxiety was growing every time her stepdaughter came for a visit.
Yeah.
They just couldn't connect. She felt disrespected. She felt dismissed. And she felt like she didn't belong. Not knowing what to do, she began finding ways to stay busy, looking for excuses to leave the house. She just wanted to create a little separation, but that came at a cost, of course.
Yeah.
She told us she felt closed off. And the real problem was that it wasn't just her stepdaughter that she was closing off. She was pulling away from her husband as well. The more anxiety she felt around her stepdaughter, the more separation she felt with her husband, and she hated that.
Yeah.
It was really hard
Yep.
because she was head over heels in love with him, and she was sure that he loved her back.
Yep.
So it was clear that there was only one problem. The step kid. Yeah,
That's right.
Of course. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah. And sometimes I hate to have to admit it, but I've been there too. There was a time in our marriage when I felt like we were on the verge of filing for divorce, and I blamed a lot of the problems we were having on Annika, who's Kim's daughter, if you don't know that already. There were times where it felt like Annika was competing with me for your attention and your favor.
Yeah.
It was like she wanted to just get her way, even if it meant creating conflict between you and I.
Yeah.
And those are times where I just felt stuck. I thought, how am I ever going to win that competition, quote unquote, right? But I discovered that I was really focusing on the wrong things, and just thinking that way was actually robbing me of the power to do something different. We'll say more about that in just a few minutes. What I really wanted was to just enjoy our marriage, honey. I wanted to be able to love Annika well in the season while she was still young and living in our home. I really did want that. But I also wanted to know that once she was grown, that we would be able to have a vibrant, connected marriage well into our empty nest years, which we're getting close to, right?
True.
And honestly, I was afraid that we wouldn't be able to make that happen. Yeah. And that's when I made the fatal mistake. I assumed that I knew the root cause of the issue, and that root cause was Annika, my stepdaughter. I started getting stressed every time I knew it was our turn to have her in our house. And before she even got there, the tensions would start to rise. And after too many months and years of feeling this stuckness, I finally started to discover a few things. Sometimes it takes a while for things to get through my thick skull.
What exactly did you figure out?
I discovered a few things. One of them is that change doesn't occur when you blame someone else. Namely, in this discussion, your stepkids, right? Sure. As long as I held on to the fact that I could point my fingers at Annika and say it was her fault and I could blame her, then what I was really doing to myself was I was keeping myself stuck. Yeah. I was just staying in a place where I couldn't do anything about it, right?
Yeah. And how many times have we heard couples come to us for help and say, oh, well, we get along great. Yeah. We have a great marriage. Everything's wonderful until the kids show up. Yeah. And then it all falls apart.
When the kids aren't around. Yeah. Exactly. But that's when we're blaming somebody else, and it keeps us stuck. Another thing that I discovered is when I see the kids as a problem, or when I saw Annika as a problem, what I was actually doing was giving her all the power. Right? So if you see the stepkids as a problem, then you can't really do anything about it until they decide to change.
Oh, boy.
Okay. So chances are they're not going to change. They're going to be who they are. They're going to try to get what they want. And they're not really overly focused on what you want. So that means every time that I saw Annika as the problem and expected her to make a change, what I was actually doing was I was handing all of my power over to her.
That's a frustrating place to be.
That's a really frustrating place to be. So the other thing, there was one more thing I think I discovered finally over the years, is that real change in our family, it started with you and I.
Yeah, definitely.
So change starts with you and your spouse, not with the kids. And I had to start figuring out how in the world I was going to focus on ways to connect with Kim rather than just sitting in this kind of contempt feeling for Annika at times. It wasn't always like that. I love Annika, don't get me wrong. But there were times where I was just stressed because she was headed our way. And I knew that things weren't going to go all that well.
We definitely had our moments.
Yeah. So I got to that point where I had to realize, like, if I want a better marriage, then I have to focus on the marriage, not just the way that kids impact the marriage, but actually being able to grab a hold of, hey, let's talk about connection between you and I. And you know what? Every marriage faces challenges. And for many step couples, parenting can be a really big challenge in their relationship. But marriage and parenting are two different things. We have to invest in both, but we have to invest in the marriage differently than we invest in our parenting.
Yes, it is interesting how one impacts the other.
Correct. Yeah. And it just gets so confusing. It gets all muddled up in our brain.
Yeah.
And we think that one is the cause of the problem in the other. But the reality is we can handle both of them differently. Right?
When we focus on them separate.
Exactly. So let's talk about 3 ways that you can start to let go of blame, regain some of your power, and start to create positive changes in your marriage.
Great.
All right. So the first one is, I call it, don't fight it, frame it. Okay. So fighting over the stepkids is something that seems to come pretty easy. It feels frustrating as a step parent when you think you have an agreement about how to handle something. And then it just seems like one little complaint from the stepkids pops up, and whatever it was you agreed on, your spouse just kind of bails on the agreement and seemingly sides with the kids. We hear that story over and over, and we've lived that story, and it feels really frustrating.
Yeah, the kids are calling all the shots.
Yeah. And what that does for a step parent most of the time is it puts us in a defensive mode, and we're ready for a good fight. Right? We want to go after it. Right. Now, if you've heard very many stories from us, you might have heard the one about our fateful camping trip. And that was probably maybe a decade ago or so, somewhere in there. And, going into this camping trip, Kim and I had an agreement about how we were going to handle Annika's engagement with the family. We wanted her to engage with the family. Now, what that really means is that we wanted her to disengage with her cell phone.
Right. So limits around the cell phone use. That was the topic.
Yeah. And we had some agreements about that.
We did.
About 2 days into the camping trip, it seemed like Annika was glued to her phone. And from my perspective, Kim wasn't holding her accountable to our agreement as a couple. And I'll tell you what, I just got ticked off. I was angry. And before we knew it, we were in the biggest fight of our marriage. Literally, this was the biggest blowout we've ever had in our marriage. Yeah. I started throwing everything in the car 3 days before we were scheduled to leave, and bam, our fun family vacation was cut short. Kim and I were deadlocked in battle. And in my mind, the root of the problem was only one thing, and it was Annika. It was actually Annika I was blaming it on. But I wonder what might have happened. I mean, we've relived this many, many times.
Yes,
and
we've dissected it.
Yeah, wonder, well, what might have happened if we had done this a little differently? What may have happened instead of fighting if I had chosen to frame a thoughtful conversation with Kim about what was happening rather than just focusing on that fight? So here's what I mean. I could have said something like this. I would have framed it this way. Honey, I've noticed that Annika's been using her phone more than we agreed that we would allow her to do. I know you want her to have fun, and maybe you're even feeling stuck in the middle between keeping your agreement with me and giving her some freedom. I'm feeling frustrated with this because I want to stick to the plan, but I'd really like to hear what's going on for you in all of this. So what I've just done here is I've actually framed the problem rather than picking a fight. And I've framed it in a way that we can handle it as a couple.
Yeah, because we didn't handle the fight very well.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That was a 3-day standoff after that one.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, in what I just said to you is I'm not blaming Annika in that. I'm not blaming Kim in that. And, as you're listening, you're going, oh, yeah, well, you've had 10 years to sit around and analyze it. I agree. And it sounds like it might be complicated, but here's a way that you can put it together for your situation. And what I did within that little framework is I used an acronym called NEAR, N-E-A-R. Okay.
You're so clever.
So you might, yeah, sometimes you might want to grab a piece of paper and write this one down. So remember, it's N-E-A-R. The first part of it is just to notice. Notice what's going on. Usually it starts with the words, I've noticed.
Sure.
Okay. And so that first part of what I noticed is, honey, I've noticed that Annika has been using her cell phone more than we agreed and that we would allow her to do.
Yeah. And honey, what I really like about the notice is that you're not labeling Annika.
Right.
You're labeling or you're noticing her behavior.
Yeah. And I'm also talking about the agreement that we had. So I'm taking notice, and I'm really sticking to the facts and keeping it simple. Okay. So N is for notice, and E is for empathize. I would have done a whole lot better if I could have just taken the time to put myself in Kim's shoes and try to figure out what she might have been feeling. So the empathize part of that statement was, hey, I know you want her to have fun. And maybe you're even feeling stuck in the middle between keeping your agreement with me and giving her some freedom. So I'm trying to think about, well, what might Kim be feeling in that moment? So I notice, I empathize. And then the A is that I admit my own struggle. So I'm going to own my own feelings and just say, I'm feeling frustrated with this because I want to stick to the plan. Now, when we do that, we want to communicate it in the tone and the approach that I'm using right now. Not, I'm really ticked off about this because I want to stick to the plan, right? But really keeping calm. I'm feeling frustrated with this because I want to stick to the plan.
And calm, not just with your words, but with your body language as well.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got the NEAR, notice, empathize, admit your struggle, and then finally, request their input. That's the R, request their input. And that just sounded like, hey, I'd really like to hear what's going on for you in all of this. And when you make that request, you have to genuinely mean it and want to listen to what they have to say, because you need to hear their side of the story. And if you're shut down already emotionally, you can't really hear that. And really what's going to happen if we can get there is we're going to start to be able to stay focused on the problem and resolving the problem rather than blaming the people. And that can really help us. So it's NEAR, notice, empathize, admit your own struggle, and then request their input. So honey, if I had done that, what might have happened for you? We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Well, it would have opened up a safe place for me to talk about what was going on with me. Because if you'll recall, I was really sick during that trip, and so was Annika. So I was really struggling to uphold the boundary that we had agreed on. And Annika was really struggling too, because she felt like not good. And she wanted to just sit on her phone rather than engage with the family. So there was a lot of things going on. And then we could have talked about that. Maybe we needed to readjust our thinking. Maybe we needed to be a little bit more flexible rather than jumping to conclusions.
It would have completely changed our interaction.
It would have, definitely.
And so that's the point, is when you're really feeling tempted to fight it, think about how you might frame it instead.
Yeah, we might have been able to stay and hang out for 3 more days like we planned.
And not missed our whole vacation. Thanks to Mike. All right, so that's our first tip. Don't fight it, frame it. How about the next one, huh?
The next one is give freedom for the bio parent to have one-on-one time with their kids. So important.
We've never talked about this before.
Well, you've heard it before. We talk about it all the time. But supporting one-on-one time in the bio relationships helps in so many different ways. And we usually talk about this in relationship to creating stability and security for the kids, which is important, and it does. However, for this discussion, there's another benefit we want to explore here. See, when a step-parent can appropriately give their spouse and their stepkids this gift of one-on-one time, it really communicates love and connection with their spouse.
So I wonder, when I had the ability and the wherewithal to really genuinely give you time freely to focus on Annika, how did that feel for you?
I felt heard. I felt valued. I felt like my need as a mother to connect with my daughter was being met. It really felt honoring, honestly.
Oh, that's a great word.
Yeah.
So in all of that, then, what did you feel toward me?
I really felt understood, which in these dynamics, a lot of times you don't feel understood.
Sure.
Bio parents and step parents both, we struggle with that. So knowing that your spouse understands you draws you closer to them.
Okay. So because you felt understood, you felt more likely to draw closer to me rather than pushing away.
Yeah, it's easier to connect when you feel understood, of course.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know what? Honestly, that giving of that one-on-one time, I didn't always do that well, right? If we go back to that terrible camping trip that we just talked about, I did a great job of stepping out of the way for you to have one-on-one time. But that was only because I was actually off by myself with our younger kids, getting more mad, building resentments, building my own case. And that's not it. That's not genuine, authentic freedom to give one-on-one time.
You didn't do it with a happy heart
Not
that time.
at all. Not at all. So that didn't work. It's not even always about the time that's given. It's about the genuineness and authenticity in with which it's given.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
It needs to be authentic.
Yeah.
That I want you to have this time and I'm going to go find my own thing to do. I'm not going to sit around and pout because you're off doing your bio thing. I'm going to go find some friends to hang out with and do something that makes me feel honored as well.
Yeah. And then when that actually happened, when we did that well, when as a step parent, when I did that well, then when we reconnected later, it was easy, for you and me.
Yeah. And a side note there, kids behave better when they get that.
Exactly.
And so then you don't have as many things to be upset about as a step parent. It's just good all around. So giving the freedom of that one-on-one time might just change the way your spouse shows up, right? I showed up differently when I got that one-on-one time with my daughter. And that leads us to our third tip.
Yep.
And that's all about separating the business of family life from building your romance.
Oh, yeah. Two different things.
Yeah, you've got to build your romantic connection. Everyone does. So we're wondering, do you have a regular date night? If not, it's time to start scheduling regular date nights and be really consistent. In almost every premarital book, class, or counseling, there's always a big emphasis on intentionally taking regular date nights. And all the research shows that couples who miss out on regular intentional one-on-one time together have a tougher time than those who make this a priority.
Yeah, sure.
They're more disconnected. So think about it. In a blended family life, you hit the ground running with kids right out of the gate, right? There really isn't a honeymoon phase. Day one, you're included in busy family life. Maybe you did take an actual honeymoon, but you missed what most family therapists would call the honeymoon period.
Yeah, two different things.
Yeah, because you're still leaving kids behind. So you're still thinking about the kids and managing all that, even on a honeymoon. I remember doing that.
A short trip doesn't equal the honeymoon period.
No, it's very different. So that means that you've got to reclaim little pieces of that and continue to build your romance. And you can't do that when it's all about the business of the family. There's parenting decisions that need to be made. There's all kinds of business to handle around your family life. But when your busy family life squeezes all of your time, squeezes all of your energy out of your relationship with each other, and you're left without simply having the ability to connect, then you're really headed for trouble. Right. We know this from experience. We've been there. And that's when it becomes really easy to blame the stress and the disconnection on the stepkids.
That's right. They are really easy to point the fingers at.
Yeah. So separate that business from building your romance and get a date night on the calendar this week if you haven't already. And while you're out there, set up a few date night do's and don'ts. This is really important. You want to put some parameters around your time together because the goal is to make a heart-to-heart connection.
Right.
So when you're on your date nights, don't talk about work. Don't talk about parenting. Don't talk about the kids or the challenges with the ex.
Yeah.
Instead, talk about things like your goals and your dreams together, your hopes for the future, or the growth you've undergone recently as individuals and as a couple.
Yeah, what are
That's
you working
really
on?
fun to talk about. Yeah, dream together. Do try to share something new about yourselves on your date night.
Yeah. that gets harder and harder the minute more years pass,
That can be challenging. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think I shared something recently and you were like, oh, I didn't know
never
that
knew
about
that.
you.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
funny after 20 years when we're able to pull something out like that. The other thing you want to do is lean into humor and playfulness.
Yeah.
Find ways to laugh together. Find ways to flirt with each other. Do some of those things that you used to do when you were first falling in love. Kind of go back and revisit those romantic times together.
I know there's something about just making each other giggle. You know, we've watched the show The Office for years, and I know if I can drop a reference to The Office, I can always make you giggle.
Oh, yeah.
And it just lightens the mood.
It does.
You know, no matter what's going on.
It does. And it makes my heart laugh. You
I
know?
know.
I'm like, oh, he gets me. He knows I think that's funny, even though it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, it's stupid, but it's my thing.
Yeah.
If you watch The Office, you'll get that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good to laugh together and play together and do something recreational. Our last, one of our last big date days was kayaking together.
Yeah, that was great.
On the lake, and we had so much fun. So do something that you can do together just to enjoy each other.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes we know this because we've been there. It's a tough season that you're going through and you don't really feel like going on a date together or even being around each other.
Yeah, we've experienced that once or twice.
Yeah. Now, if that's you, you might want to reach out for some marriage counseling or to work with a coach to kind of work through your issues. That's always a good thing to do. And we had to do that through a season.
Yeah, you know, when you're in that tough season, reaching out for help is important. And before you do that, you might be willing to at least give a date night a try. We had a season where we really didn't want to talk to each other. We didn't want to be around each other. We didn't want to talk at home, much less going out on a date night somewhere in public, right? But we decided that it was going to be important for our future. And so we got really practical around it. One of the things we did was we had a book of conversation starters.
Yeah,
I mean,
that really helped.
It did. It felt like one of the stupidest things ever, but it also really helped to lighten the mood. Sometimes the questions were actually kind of humorous or silly. And so we even had an opportunity to laugh. Sometimes we felt frustrated by the stupidity of the comment, but then or the question. And so we just moved on to another one. Yeah. But the point was, we were in this season where we were getting help and we were making date night a priority at the same time. And we found ways to at least spend time together. Yeah. And so if you're in a really tough season, we encourage you to consider both reaching out for help and what date night might look like for you.
Yeah, stick to that commitment that you're going to fight for your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew this was really important for us in the long term to stay connected as best we could, even though we were struggling.
Yeah.
For our long-term future, it was really a priority for us.
That's right.
And I'm so glad we did.
So here's the thing. If you're feeling hopeless about your marriage, you're tempted to blame it on the stepkids. Remember that you can let go of that blame, regain some power, and make positive changes in your marriage when you don't fight it, but you frame it instead. When you give that freedom of one-on-one time to invest in your marriage, and when you separate the business of family life from building your romance. Okay, just those three things can give you a little bit more influence over how you're going to keep moving forward in your marriage. Well, we hope this was valuable for you today. And next week, we're going to kind of continue this conversation from a different angle and talk about some tips for enjoying your stepkids just a little bit more, even when they feel frustrating.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we would love it if you would leave us a rating or a review. And until then, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.